You ever want to see the epitome of rivalry week where they don't like you, we don't like them, and we really don't care about what happens on the field as long as we're kicking their ass off of it? That's the Iron Bowl, which is exactly why Alabama stays alive for one more week in the hunt for a college football playoff berth. Welcome on into the SEC Unfiltered postgame show. He's Dave Shumate. I'm Cole Thompson, breaking down everything that we saw at Bryant-Denny Stadium as Alabama secures a 2-touchdown victory in Kalen DeBoer's first Iron Bowl. Real quickly, make sure that you like the video, hit that ring notification down below, because this is your number one source for all things SEC throughout the college football playoff season and really 24/7. Make sure that you also download the podcast version of the show wherever you get your podcast listening systems. Follow us on the socials, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at SEC Unfiltered. Follow Dave at Mach 10 Sports, me at Mr. Cole Thompson, and check out all of our great work found at secunfiltered.com. This post-game show is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app and use the promo code SECU for $20 off your first purchase. Guys, you're probably not going to see a playoff game at Bryant-Denny Stadium this year, but you are potentially going to go to the playoffs, so you might want to go ahead and rack up those tickets. And if you don't have tickets for that, maybe go to a basketball game at Coleman. Maybe go to a basketball game out in Auburn. Maybe go to a baseball game next season in spring training. The NFL, wherever you see fit, a comedy show, concerts. Game Time has you covered. So go to the promo code SECU at the Game Time app to get $20 off your first purchase. Dave, this is the pinnacle of all rivalries. I have said this time and time again. When you think about the South, when you think about the Southern region and what is SEC football at its finest, where wars are settled, this is the game. It's Bo over the top. It's the comeback. It's the kick six. It's the fourth down at Jordan Hare. Mechie making magic. It's 4th and 31. It is everything that you want in this performance. And Kalen DeBoer gets a win. Kalen DeBoer now moves to 1-0 all-time in the rivalry. Hugh Freeze moves to 0-2. This is now a game that might be enough with how much chaos occurred today to send Alabama to the college football playoff. Not a guarantee, but it might be enough to at least put them in the running to where you can't leave them out.
Yeah, no, I mean, especially now with you getting some of the breaks with what happened down in Syracuse, New York. But yeah, again, I mean, I think we could all say it wasn't the cleanest of games. It kind of felt like Bama probably could have beat them worse, left some meat on the bone. I mean, it's tough to get a double-digit win when you turn the football over 4 times. It statistically isn't a normal thing, so it's kind of surprising. I think Auburn at the same time would probably tell you we could have made this a little closer. We made some mistakes. I didn't really like the game plan Auburn had. They left a little lot. I thought Auburn was going to come out with a little bit more fire in this game. I don't know. It just felt like they never really got going. Give Alabama and Kane Womack that defense credit, man. I thought Auburn potentially could have got the run game really going today, especially with Alabama's Deontay Lawson out at the backer spot, who I think will be a massive loss no matter what, if Alabama makes the playoffs or not. I said that when they lost him in the first half against Oklahoma last week.
I mean, he's done for the year.
Oh, there goes Bama's national title hopes, any they had. But if you'd have told me Bama held Auburn under 100 yards, I mean, I'd have been a little surprised today. But give them credit. Bama was just making them take what's in front of them. Let's see if Peyton Thorne can go drive the field. Some critical stops, some key third downs. I thought the highlight of the day was the defense. And I think they've played well for majority of the second half. Again, outside of the first quarter against Oklahoma, they kind of settled in. But on offense, man, it still just kind of seems cluttery and clunky. At times, I thought the offense I give Auburn's defensive line credit. I thought they got the best of Alabama's offensive line a lot of times today, especially on that right side. They're trying to bully Elijah Pritchett. But Alabama, you win. You cover 28-14. I wouldn't say it's as good as it could have been. I mean, you could have taken off of that momentum in the third quarter and ran off with it and really put a statement in. But a lot of things have gone your way today. South Carolina beat Clemson.
Yep.
Syracuse beat Miami.
Yep.
I don't really know how the game, Ohio State, Michigan really affects you. But again, I think Alabama's in as good as a spot as they could have hoped for after the debacle last weekend in Norman.
Think about this for a second, Dave. We were a pick 6 away in the matchup between Notre Dame and USC from potentially 3 top 10 teams once again going down. And with Notre Dame not having a conference championship, it's really hard to sell that they belong in a 12-team postseason picture. And so that would do wonders for Alabama. It would do wonders for Ole Miss. And it would do wonders for South Carolina. Not saying that all would get in, but what I am saying is it would benefit them more than anybody else. With Alabama, I think the big takeaway is they found a way to, even with the self-inflicting wounds, which have been a problem this year, you and I can both agree, there have been so many times throughout the season where Alabama allows lesser tier competition to hang around. When they needed to capitalize, they were able to. When they needed a big time run from Jalen Milroe, they got it. Now, were there some problems along the way with turnovers? Absolutely. Was the interception egregious? Absolutely. Was the fumble in the third quarter one that could have been a complete game changer if Auburn's offense was able to capitalize? Absolutely. But you also were able to win on third down. We've talked about this so many times, how much you need to be consistent when moving the sticks. That will make or break you. They were 12 of 18. They went for it, and they got 24 first downs. They had over 457 yards of offense. They were able to put themselves in a great position when it came to capitalizing on minor mistakes. They put themselves in a good position to where you watch as Jeremy Bernard stepped on up. There were a couple of bad plays at times from, I think, Ryan Williams. That's a freshman living in the big-time moment in a rivalry game. And ultimately, at the end of the day, you get a win, and you get a double-digit win, and Kalen DeBoer gets to save a little bit of face. This should be a moot point because of the weekend last week. I mean, the performance last week down in Norman is almost inexcusable simply because of how bad that offense has been all year. And you don't control your destiny to the college football playoff. But with the performance like this at home, I think it's enough to where you can kind of sit back, take an exhale breath, realize that the competition in front of you didn't live up to the expectations as well. And because if you were that last team out, technically you could be that last team in.
No, 100%. Yeah, I mean, you're in a much better spot than you thought you'd be.
Absolutely.
Last week, give them credit. They got off the mat. Again, I thought Auburn would have a better game. I know I keep kind of going back to that. I thought Hugh Freeze would have a better game plan. I thought they called some really bad plays there off that turnover you mentioned just a second ago. Call off the fumble. It could have, like, if Auburn scores there, cut it to 1-score lead there at the beginning of the fourth quarter. That'd been big. But Alabama was having like a 3-high look back, and you throw a running back pass, and I mean, I don't really know who. I think it might have been, was it Jarquez Hunter threw that?
Jarquez Hunter, yeah. Jarquez
Hunter.
Hubbard
picked it, and he could have fair caught it. But yeah, it was just an interesting play call. But I give Bama credit. They were going to make, look, they're going to have to drive the field on us, give up explosive plays. I was really worried about them today. I would not have guessed they would have held Auburn's rushing attack, who has ran the football pretty well at times this year.
Extremely.
You talked about it. Go one of the more underrated running backs in the entire country and conference. He's just on a bad team. But no, I think Kalen DeBoer needed this win more than Hugh Freeze, as wild as that is to say, because Hugh Freeze was trying to just get the bowl eligibility. Kind of sets the tone in like, all right, Kalen DeBoer can breathe a little bit. Again, 9-3, underachieved this year. Should have been 10-2, I think. But I think you getting this, I mean, it could have been a lot worse if you finished 8-4 and a loss to give Auburn 6 wins in Hugh Freeze's second year. It could have been a lot worse. So,
well, Dave, think about this for a second too. Yeah. You would have given Oklahoma bowl eligibility. You would have given Auburn bowl eligibility. You lost on the road to a Vanderbilt squad, regardless of how great of a story Vanderbilt is this year, because they are a great story. And they just had moments against Tennessee and Mizzou that both finished 9-3 and 10-2 this year. Like, they've given a fight. But it's Vanderbilt and your Alabama. You can't afford to lose those type of games. It would be one thing to say if you lost to South Carolina, you go 9-3. It's another thing to say you lost to Auburn and Oklahoma when you were a game away from clinching a spot in the SEC title game, and more importantly, a spot in the college football playoff. That's, I think, the point that many people have been trying to make throughout the last several weeks. It's not that you lost games and that now you don't control your own destiny. It's who you lost to. That's the souring point at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I think that's, again, we talked about it. I mean, Nick Saban had one loss to an unranked team in his time. It was a 2021 game to Texas A&M. Bama fans were accustomed to, if they were the better football team, they were going to win that game. Maybe ugly, but they were going to win the football game. That's been – I thought Kalen DeBoer, when you've had some doubts of Alabama and going into big games, they've came out and played their best in the biggest games. And I think it kind of goes back to Kalen DeBoer from Washington against – Dan Lanning, Steve Sarkisian, both at Oregon and Texas. He's undefeated, hadn't lost either one of them. So for whatever reason, it's like this first year against Vanderbilt and Oklahoma. And again, Oklahoma and Vanderbilt aren't terrible, but they aren't great. They aren't good losses. Well, let's call
They're
it
not good losses. That's the problem.
It's not a Kentucky loss like Ole Miss, but it's still, I mean, you're splitting hairs. It's called a spade. You shouldn't have lost those games. First year, you always got to count a loss you're not expecting for any head coach. I mean, give Kalen DeBoer credit. He had, by 2 games, I think he won the most games of any first-year Alabama head coach. Now, granted, there's context to everything. It's the best situation any head coach has ever taken over. Now, you could say Ray Perkins took over for Coach Bryant, but it was kind of fading at the end of Coach Bryant's tenure. It wasn't like Alabama lost in a national championship, like a playoff setting like Alabama did last year. I mean, you're taking over, again, not the prime Alabama dynasty, but come on. They've missed on some evaluations late, but it isn't that bad. But still, I mean, two things can be true at once, as we always talk about, Cole. It's like, all right, 9-3, I think you kind of made it a respectable season. If you snuck in the playoffs again, I think if you got left out, you have nothing to complain about.
No, but at the same time, I feel like you've done enough to where you can get in.
Yeah, yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I think if you look at the resume, I think right now, South Carolina is playing the best out of probably the 4 teams in this contention of Miami, Alabama, South Carolina, and Ole Miss. But if you look at just the resumes and complete season picture, I mean, if you're just comparing those 4 teams, which I think is what it will probably come down to, how is it not Alabama? They're tied with South Carolina. They beat South Carolina head-to-head. That has to mean something. Maybe it wouldn't if South Carolina had like one less loss or something. That it wouldn't mean as much. I mean, what's Miami's best win, Bear? Florida? Potentially?
It's Florida.
I think Ole Miss has got a horrendous loss to Kentucky. They never.
Dave, I'm gonna stop you real fast. Miami's out, in my opinion, and the reason Miami is out has nothing to do with the fact they play in the ACC. It's the fact that you go back and look at the schedule. They don't have a single ranked win. They don't, and they have 2 terrible losses. One to Georgia Tech, which again, I'm not saying Georgia Tech's a bad team, but you knew that Georgia Tech was the game that you couldn't lose after last year, and then Syracuse that lost to UNLV. I mean, that's what we're talking about. You can't.
To my point there, I was just going to say, I think Bama out of those 4 teams by far is the best win. So, I mean, I feel like they check the box on every kind of, it's like outside of, who's played the best football probably in the last 5 to 6 weeks. Yeah, I'd probably say South Carolina's played the best complimentary football for sure. But again, it's not just a 6-week season, guys. It's not like college basketball does. How have you played in your last 10 games? They take that in when they're seeding committee. College, we don't do that in this sport. So I think it's kind of like I was on the phone with my dad you asked who I was talking to before. It's like, man, I think if you're just comparing the season-long resumes, it's really not, especially if Georgia goes and wins the SEC next week. Now, we did talk about this, Bear. I mean, A&M could really put a kink in all this, potentially, if they won tonight and they won next week against Georgia.
Who, A&M? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, A&M could easily do that. That's a big question, but it's also a big what if, especially for the conference. One thing I do want to talk about is this was the best performance from Jeremy Renard. I remember when he joined with Kalen DeBoer. This was somebody I was very excited about because I watched his tape when he was at Michigan State, and I watched him when he was in a very limited role as the wide receiver 4 during his time at Washington. And I figured Ryan Williams is going to be the dude long term. You have some guys on the roster, Kendrick Law, Kobe Prentice. They're going to make some noise. But Jeremy Bernard has to be your number 1 this year because if he has the best understanding about what Nick Sheridan and what Kalen DeBoer want. And this was a performance to where when you look back, it was an underwhelming season a little bit for him. But at the same time, when you get over 100 receiving yards in a rivalry game, you find it for 15.9 yards per play, 7 targets, you pick up 6 first downs. It's really hard to argue with. And I think that this is where if you are a guy like Jeremy Bernard, you have to decide what's best for you. Do you think that you can make it in the NFL next year, or you can come back for one more season, continue to build up the success alongside Kalen DeBoer, depending on what happens with Jalen Milroe, and we'll get to that in a moment. There's a lot to like about the wide receiver core because if they are going to bring in at least one more 5-star receiver this offseason, they're going to, I think, go into the transfer portal and get another Jeremy Bernard type. You still have Ryan Williams. He's not going anywhere. I don't think so, and I don't think anybody else believes it because the NIL collective won't let him leave. You like your tight ends. You like your situation. Outside of maybe adding in one extra player, Bernard, Williams, whoever is your starting tight end next year, I think that's a good formation for a young quarterback or even a guy like Jalen Milroe, if he is to return, to be successful in 2024. And the schedule, again, it's the exact same as you had in 2024, next year in 2025. The difference is that you're switching sides. Instead of playing against a team like South Carolina at home, you're playing on the road. Instead of playing against Missouri at home, you're playing on the road. So that still benefits you, especially for these teams that are going to lose a lot of talent, and you could probably just regroup because you're Alabama.
Yeah, no, Bama's going to have more options in the portal this year just because of timing. Remember when Nick retired on January 11th, they couldn't go in the portal and get any SEC guys due to conference rules. That'll change this year. I expected them to be pretty heavy in the portal. Then I saw some Bama recruiting staffers followed the God, the kid's name totally slips my mind. The Washington State quarterback, real fast. I'll tell you,
John Mater. John Mateer.
I saw they started following him, so maybe they go with him. Yeah, Jalen Milroe coming back, Bear, will be interesting. Does that happen? Does it not happen? I mean,
do you want to talk about it?
I mean, we can. I don't really think we have a true answer, but we can talk about it.
I don't know if it's the best move, personally. I think Jalen Milroe has been a phenomenal quarterback. He led you to a college football playoff. He led you to an SEC title. There is a very good shot that depending on how much more chaos occurs tonight, he could lead you to a playoff appearance for a second year. And so in 2 years, he will have 2 Iron Bowl wins. He'll have one of the greatest plays in the history of the sport. He'll have 1 conference championship. He'll get you into the postseason. I think that's where you draw the line because there still are some question marks when it comes to his game. The fumbling is an issue. The turnovers are a big deal. And it's something that has hindered the success of Alabama. And there comes a point where you have to figure out, what is it? Is it the play calling? Is it the quarterback? Is it the design? Is it the fit? There's already speculation that he's going to be one of the top 5 quarterbacks in next year's draft class. And I think for everybody involved, the best thing for him is to go to the pros if he does believe he's ready. And he could be. If they go on an epic run throughout the playoffs, if they get in and they're able to get to the semifinals, are you really thinking at this point you're going to transfer, go somewhere else, be able to put up the same type of production and keep your draft stock at what it is, whether it be a late first round, early second round pick? I just think that you've reached your wall in the style of offense that you want to run with Kalen DeBoer and Jalen Milroe. It's not an insult. Sometimes marriages don't work. And there's this one where you have your moments. It's like a relationship that you know is destined to fail at some point, but there's a lot of positivity and you guys get a dog and you guys are able to make it work. And then you move into the same apartment together and he gets a promotion.
Some good moments.
And nobody's complaining about it, but the fighting is still there. You guys are still going out to the bars and leaving early because she's in tears and he's frustrated. And it's just not a cohesive marriage. I like Jalen Milroe. I think Jalen Milroe is a good quarterback. Anybody that says that he is not a good quarterback in college football, I don't know what you mean by that. I really don't. I think that there is a limit and there is a ceiling for this offense with Jalen Milroe. And there's also a ceiling for what Jalen Milroe can do in this offense. And eventually, when you reach that point and it's 9-3, maybe sneaking into the college football playoff, maybe if you're lucky getting a win on the road and then losing in the quarterfinals, that's where you know you've hit your wall.
Yeah, no, it kind of feels like everybody's trying to figure themselves out within the offense. Again, I doubt he hits the portal because let's be honest, man. Like most teams would take him. And is there any way that you can guarantee me you would go get a quarterback that is guaranteed to be better than Jalen Milroe? I mean, again, I get as frustrated with the guy just from watching it from a football guy standpoint as anybody at times because I think he lacks awareness, ball security, just when it can go bad at times, it can go bad. I don't know. Keelan Russell, I think, is a big-time quarterback. I don't think he's ready to be a starter year 1, but I think he does fit the system better than what Jalen Milroe does. Austin Mack, I think, fits it better. But again, are you really going to just get rid of a quarterback that while he has his struggles, and honestly, I think he's been worse with turnovers this year than he was last year. But
he was.
In college football, I think 2 things can be true at once. Who can you go get that for sure is better? And I also think at the same time, I don't think personally Alabama can win a national championship with Jalen Milroe at quarterback because I do think he's with these good coordinators. And again, I thought DJ Durkin would have a little bit of conversation for another time, but I think he's pretty easy to defend. Like, honestly, I do. Like, I don't think he's a great runner. I don't think he's a great anticipatory runner. Like, in a run, he makes plays off improvisation. But like you watch Haynes King last night. Haynes King actually has a feel for the run game as a quarterback, as a runner. Like he's setting up blocks. He's patient. He knows what you see Milroe sometimes running into his own blockers. I mean, he's the best athlete on the field. Jalen in the design run game zone read does not have a feel. For the most part, he doesn't. Now, he'll make a play, keep it. He guesses right every now and then. But had a big third down, he guessed right today. But overall, it's just not consistent enough. I think to go win a championship. So I think 2 things can be true at once. I think you would miss him more than you probably think you would, but I also think you're not going to go reach your, like you mentioned, ultimate ceiling your total upside with him at quarterback as an entire offense.
See, I disagree. I think that he's a great runner. What I worry about with him is that instead of actually just trying to go down and understand this is the end of the play, you make a second move and it ends up hurting you. How many times do you watch him take a step backwards when he's right at the line to be able to kind of get an extra 15 yards rather than just slide, tuck it, and run and just call it a day right there?
Or it's getting north and south. He doesn't ever get north and south.
He always goes east and west
to try to outrun everybody. It's like, dude, just get north and south, man. You got to have a feel for this as a runner.
And again, how many times have we seen this year teams with the north and south attempt work and then they go east and west and they end up screwing themselves? I mean, again, you look at the Florida game versus Ole Miss 2 weeks ago. If you run J.J. Bakese, a 375-pound defensive tackle, north and south, he's going to get the first down. But you try to go off tackle and it nearly costs you a spot in the college football playoff. No questions asked. And it still might have. It still might have. It's just that's the problem I have with Jalen Miller. He's a hyper-extensive athlete. He makes really good decisions at times, but he also makes so many bonehead plays. Dave, he had 3 fumbles and an interception today. He lost 2 of them. I mean, it's impossible for you to sit there and say that that is sustainable in the SEC. You got very lucky at times in the South Carolina performance that you didn't come back and blow it. You got very lucky in the Georgia game. I mean, Alabama, as good as they are, when they're humming, they are humming. Nobody can take that away from them. But at the same time, how many moments have you gone back? The turnovers in the game last week against Oklahoma, the turnovers in the game against Vanderbilt, the turnovers in the game against Tennessee. And some of those are not play designs. It's on Jalen just not being there. And it's a situation where Jalen stuck it out because if he wanted to graduate from the University of Alabama, he wanted to bring Alabama to its peak. He brought Alabama to a college football playoff. There's a very good shot that he can do it a second time. But that's it. That might be it. And this is not the coach that you also signed up to play for. This was a coach that you bought into and believed he was the best fit for you. And for a while he was, but now he's not. And for Alabama to be successful, I think Jalen Milroe and them have to find a way to separate. I think for Jalen Milroe to be successful and reach his peak, they have to find a way to separate. I do want to talk about real fast because this has been a big deal. SEC officiating has pissed me off this year on so many different levels. On the penalty against Malachi Moore and Devonta Smith, I understand that they got to get flagged. I have no problem with that. The fact that they were starting a fight and starting a brawl on the opposing side, whatever, so be it. How do you not flag anybody on Auburn's side?
Well, shit, I think you look at it, I think Auburn started. He was the one.
They did start it. He got him in the face mask.
And then ripped his helmet off. Yeah, if anything, I think both staffs would have been all right with a offsetting penalty. And it kind of turned the momentum with that game. I mean, Bama was dominating that second half. And it kind of Auburn went down and scored the catch to Cam Coleman. That's when Bama was going, and then Milroe fumbled. And then obviously you had the Bray Hubbard pick off the trick play that kind of put it away. But, man, yeah, you're right, Cole. That's bad. Like, how is that? It's almost like, guys, it just seemed pretty common sense, just so this doesn't get out of hand, that we just call offsetting penalties on both teams. Why are you calling on one team here when it was initiated by the Auburn player?
And again, I'm not saying that by any means Peyton Thorne doesn't still go down there and find a way to get a touchdown pass to Cam Coleman, who, by the way, once again, in the biggest moments has shown you time and time he can be a difference maker. That is somebody that you have to invest in as your foundation if you're Hugh Freeze. But the fact is that they gave him 15 extra yards when both sides got into it. And this is the problem that I have with SEC officiating. I'm going to call it as is. Last night, how many missed penalties were there against Georgia Tech when Georgia was on the field? Tons. How many were there when Georgia was on the field against Georgia Tech? Tons. It's on both instances. And this is another moment where it didn't cost you the game. Alabama stayed in control. Alabama didn't find a way to shoot itself in the foot, just like Oklahoma last week didn't find a way to shoot itself in the foot. But my God, officiating has got to be better. This is no longer 1974 where you're working at the lumber mill on a Friday, then traveling down to Starkville, Mississippi to put on the zebra stripes and then call a game to go back to your 9-to-5 job Monday morning. That's not the case. Greg Sankey's got to be better. You got to be better if you're an officiating crew, because if these are moments where in today's game it didn't cost you. In a game in the SEC championship, Texas A&M is driving. It might cost you next season. It cost South Carolina a guaranteed spot in the college football playoff. It caught multiple teams this year on boneheaded plays. I just can't stomach it. I can't stomach when any side is missing the obvious. You missed obvious blatant calls. That was a blatant call against Auburn. The fight was started on Auburn's side, and it carried on over to Alabama, and they didn't stop. And you want to know what? The thing I can appreciate about Kalen DeBoer more than anything else, he seems cool, calm, and collective, and very much a guy that most people down in Alabama wouldn't appreciate because of the way that Nick freaked out over everything. But then when you see how bonehead of a play is being officiated by the refs, he gets into it, and he gets in their face and says, how dare you make that type of play? I'm coming after you, and he defends his players. I can appreciate that from a guy like Kalen DeBoer. Cool, calm, collective, carry a big stick. Don't talk a big game until you have to.
Yeah, I mean, for Kalen DeBoer to get pretty fired up, something's got to be pretty off. Just like the penalty against Oklahoma last week, it called off the Ryan Williams call. What else? He's mad about the play we're talking about. He's mad about something right after it. I think maybe a PI call. He was pissed off.
Yeah, it was a PI call, and it was a terrible PI call.
Yeah. No, yeah, officiating. Well, I feel like we talk about it in most videos, but no, you're right. It's been officiating. I didn't understand that one at all. That should have been an offsetting penalty across the board.
Dave, let me ask you. We got to talk about Auburn. They're not going to go to a bowl game this year. I understand that when you look at a team like Ole Miss, when you look at a team like Mizzou, they go 9-3. They don't guarantee their spot in the college football playoff with an easier schedule. But Auburn has got to be a disappointing team. They have to be at least in the top 2. And the reason has nothing to do with their record. It has to do with the fact of they're the reason they are 5-7. It's not that they were outgained by quality competition. It's not that they were a terrible team that was regressing. It was self-inflicting wounds, and we saw it once again. And it happened in so many instances. There was the fumble by Malcolm Simmons. There was the interception by Peyton Thorne. There was the missed field goal attempt. The special teams has been terrible this year for Auburn. It was the blatant penalties that they had against their team. It was several holding calls that pushed them back and out of field goal range. It was drop passes. It was, again, the errancy of Peyton Thorne not being the guy. Auburn is actually a team that probably should be sitting at 7-5 and going to a bowl game rather than sitting at 5-7. The honeymoon period is over for Hugh Freeze. I mean, if anybody still believes that right now Hugh Freeze is feeling high and mighty because if he's got a great recruiting class, that means nothing. I think DJ Durkin is safe. I think you have to go hire an offense coordinator in the offseason. I think you have to guarantee that you're landing a premier quarterback. And I'm not talking about a dude that's going to come on in and be a 5-star difference maker because Deuce Knight isn't promised anymore. He was in Oxford yesterday meeting with Lane Kiffin. So there is a shot that he flips.
I don't even think he's the answer next year.
He's not.
He got banged up in high school games at George County this year. I mean, he played. I think he missed the first 4 or 5 weeks. Yeah, he's not the. They're gonna have to go in the portal and find somebody. You're right though, Cole. I think DJ Durkin's certainly fine. I mean, hell, that was the bright spot of the season if you're them. But it is
every single week too.
4 straight losing seasons for Auburn. Again, not all those are Freeze. 2 of those were Harsin. 2 of them are Freeze. But Cole, what would you give plus a letter grade plus minus system for Hugh through 2 seasons so far?
C-. Honestly, because I think that you can say last year the fact that you at least played close against Georgia and Alabama in year 1 with both those teams feeling like they were college football playoff bound, you can give them at least that. But this year I can't give you anything. You lost to Cal. You lost to Arkansas. You lost to Oklahoma.
You chose not to go get a quarterback in the All-Star. I'd probably go D, dude. I mean, losing records your first 2 years and all. It's not like people are sitting there like, man, we're stuck at 8-9 wins. Let's get to 10. What's our deal? It's like, I mean, dude, they're just hoping to get to 6 wins right now. And we still can't.
I was saying I could give him a C- because of you did get a signature win over Texas A&M last week. And you did last year also have you did last year go to a bowl game. So I have to at least give you that for a C-. But those weren't the expectations. That's never the expectation.
Like most people had them at 7-8 wins this year. And I thought that schedule was favorable. Now, Vanderbilt was better than you thought they would be. But outside of that, I mean, I know they lost to Cal, but Cal kind of ended up what we thought they would be, a very 500 ACC team. That's a game in year 2 with Hugh Freeze. I would say at home, you should win. And you kind of got dominated in it. Now, you're right, Bear. I mean, honestly, if Peyton Thorne does anything but throw an interception on the play to Oklahoma, they probably win. Just go down, back, you probably punt, and you win the game. So, like you said, you watch Auburn all year. Me and Chris used to talk about it. You don't feel like you're watching like an awful football team. You know what I mean? You're like, no, they moved the football. They run the football. The defense has played pretty well. I thought they put a great performance up against Vanderbilt in the loss. Like they've had opportunities, but you're just like, they just made just boneheaded decisions in critical situations. And that'll be Hugh Freeze's key. Again, he's got some good young talent. We've talked about that, but it starts at the quarterback spot. And I think Deuce Knight could be the future. But, man, you got to go get somebody who can at least kind of be a stopgap player maybe for a year or two till Deuce Knight gets acclimated to the college style for a college game really physically so he can get the strength and conditioning program.
He's the future. He's not the present. That's the big deal. And the bottom line is that also it's very hard for me to give any bit of flack toward Hugh Freeze this year because the defense did its job. You went out, you added in transfers. I mean, you're talking about a guy like Keandre Lambert-Smith. If he was at Penn State right now, he probably would have had over 1,000 yards. This year, you're not even going to get another 1,000-yard receiver for the first time since the Y2K because if he's going to fall short. And this was a dude that could have been a difference maker. Cam Coleman's going to fall short. Malcolm Simmons is going to fall short. And the crazy part is, Dave, you're going to hear some of these names that I'm mentioning go into the portal. They're going to at least feel it around and figure out, hey, this isn't the place for me. If a Perry Thompson leaves or if a Malcolm Simmons leaves or if one of your offensive linemen leave or one of your defensive ends leave, that's a big deal because if you can't retain the talent. So it's no longer just about developing. It's about retaining. And what happened a few years ago when a guy who was heralded for his recruiting skills couldn't keep together a quality class? He lost his job after a win against Mississippi State. Jimbo Fisher was shown the door. You are going to feel the pressure if you don't go out, bring in some prime candidates in the transfer portal, continue to develop talent, bring in the right talent via recruiting, and put yourself in a great situation to where next year, maybe you aren't going to the college football playoff, but you sure as hell are winning games against Arkansas. You sure as hell are winning games in non-conference matchups. You sure as hell are not letting Oklahoma beat you with Michael Hawkins Jr. and Kip Lewis picking off a pass to put you behind the sticks. That has to be the bottom line if you are Hugh Freeze this offseason. Because if I can tell you what, Auburn is the toughest job in all of college football. I will die on that take. It is the hottest take that I've had, and I don't even think it's really that hot anymore. But this is not okay. 5-7 and 6-7 is not okay. Brian Harsin was a more accomplished coach out at the G5 level with Boise State than Hugh Freeze. And they had the same record. Actually, Freeze is a worse record because of he wasn't fired. That becomes a problem. You have to fix it by the time that we're here next season, or I think you got to go swing big in the swing big in the coaching cycle, very big. And I'm talking bigger than Lane Kiffin.
Yeah. I mean, you talk about it too. I mean, they both probably had one key signature win. I mean, it was Harsin, I think, beat Ole Miss that year, his last year or his first year, and then Hugh got the win against, like you said, A&M. I mean, they both played Bama close at home. Yeah, next year's massive for Hugh Freeze. He's going to be in that conversation with Brent Venables, Hugh Freeze, Mark Stoops, kind of all in that kind of Sam Pittman will all kind of be in that same realm of coaches. Billy Napier will probably be in the same boat. Who could potentially be let go next year? I mean, because I don't think we're not going to see anybody leave the job this year. But Hugh Freeze will definitely he's the first name that comes to mind where it's like, I mean, Hugh, you're going to go win 8 games next year. I mean, even if I'm an Auburn fan, it's like 7. It's like, geez, man.
The only way that I think that you will see an opening in the SEC is if Mark Stoops were to step down, him step down, and Sam Pittman step down. Besides that, you're not going to see an opening this year. And that kind of speaks volume of what the SEC is. Dave, before we get on out of here, I do want to say just one last thing. When we talk about the conference, especially how people in the national perspective have said it's a down year, it's time to admit that this season, with the parity of the transfer portal, with the NIL collective, there is not an elite team in college football. There isn't. And the way that you're going to have to start judging conferences is based off their middle tier teams. Because of teams in the Big Ten right now, the fact that Michigan put the brakes on a roster like Ohio State says a lot. The fact that Minnesota went down to the wire against Penn State says a lot. Where you don't see that in the SEC because at this point, every team is good enough to beat every team. But you don't usually have those conversations because Michigan also had to go down to the wire with USC. They got boat raced by Notre Dame in the fourth quarter. That becomes a problem. At some point, you have to realize that there is down years. And if you're going to hold the SEC to a certain standard, you better hold Miami to that same standard. You better hold Ohio State to that same standard. You better hold Michigan, Penn State, all these teams that you say, oh, well, they belong in the college football playoff. Because of Alabama, the fact they have a signature win against Georgia, the fact that they went into Death Valley and dominated against LSU, I don't care if it's LSU.
Think about it too, Bear. This is something we're not talking about for their resume. They have 2 wins over 2 9-3 teams in South Carolina and Missouri.
Yeah, and more importantly, they also have a win on the road at Death Valley, and they went to Wisconsin, just like Texas went to Michigan, and they dominated against a Wisconsin team. So I don't want to hear it anymore. Yeah. I don't. I get it. I understand the SEC had a down year, but just be real. College football in general did not have an elite team in 2024. And if you're going to judge the SEC, you better carry that same energy for every other conference in the sport.
Well, I agree with you. I think it's kind of a down year in the SEC. I mean, not only in the SEC, but college football across the board. I agree. Depth, quarterback play injuries. It's just in the season's longer, but really depth. I mean, you heard Kirby Smart mention it at the beginning of the year. It's the worst depth he's had since his first year in 2016. So I really think that's really what it is. Transfer portal, lack of cohesiveness, kids getting there in the summer, not having an off season to go hit a strength and conditioning program. And this is the time of year in late November, we're adding in extra games. So we're going to see kind of the downfall of that. But I mean, it makes for an exciting college football playoff. I think there's more teams than even I initially anticipated, because I think back at the 14 playoff, I always thought there was legitimately only like 2 or 3 teams that could win the whole thing. But yeah, I mean, this year it's just kind of not a down year in a bad way. I just think teams aren't as consistent as we've seen in the past.
Like, rate, review, subscribe. Make sure that you're following us on all the social channels, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at SEC Unfiltered. Follow Dave at Mock 10 Sports, me at Mr. Cole Thompson. Check out all of our great work found at secunfiltered.com. And before you leave, just do us a favor. Make sure that you hit that ring notification. It's that little bell icon, because we are going to go live after what has been a 13-year in the making period. And it's going to be a long one, I can promise you. Even if Dave is not here, I will be here. I will be speaking on the Lone Star Showdown that is commencing currently at Kyle Field. And that's going to be a show that you don't want to miss. So make sure you hit that ring notification, and make sure that you also hit subscribe, because of the race to the finish line for 12 teams to go to the college football playoff might eventually actually fall through the SEC. For Dave Shumate, I am Cole Thompson. Alabama wins the Iron Bowl and maybe, just maybe, puts their spot in the college football playoff. Peace.